First up in this episode, we hear about something that is rarely experienced, let alone documented. It's the story of a strange encounter with something so inexplicable that the woman who shared it is still reeling from what happened. A woman from Emporia, Kansas, contacted me about a peculiar incident she experienced in early May. She works as a late-night radio DJ at a small local station and was driving home around 2:15 a.m. on a Thursday morning. The night was clear with a small sliver of moon, providing minimal natural light. Her commute takes her through sparsely populated areas, mostly passing by cornfields and occasional wooded lots. She had been on the road for about 20 minutes when something caught her attention. Initially, she just figured her eyes were tired from her long shift and affecting her vision. Off to her left, approximately 200 yards from the road, she noticed an unusual disturbance in one of the cornfields. It appeared as if a section of the field, roughly circular and about 30 feet in diameter, was moving in an unnatural way. The corn stalks in this area seemed to be swaying and bending, despite there being no wind that night. As she continued driving, she kept glancing over, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. The movement wasn't violent or destructive. Rather, it looked as if the corn was gently rippling, almost like waves on water. This motion was confined to the circular area, with the surrounding crop remaining perfectly still. Intrigued and slightly unsettled, she decided to pull over to observe more closely. She turned off her car but left the headlights on, illuminating the edge of the field. From her stationary position, she could see that the movement had a distinct pattern. The corn stalks would bend outward from the center of the circle, then slowly straighten back up, creating a ripple effect that moved from the middle to the edges. She sat in her car watching for several minutes, debating whether to investigate further. The rational part of her mind suggested there must be a logical explanation, but she couldn't think of anything that could cause such a localized and regular disturbance. After about 10 minutes of observation, she noticed a change. The movement of the corn began to slow, and a faint, yellowish glow appeared at the center of the affected area. The light was dim at first, barely noticeable, but it steadily grew brighter. It didn't illuminate the surrounding area like a floodlight would. Instead, it seemed to be contained within the circle of moving corn. As the glow intensified, the movement of the corn stalks became more erratic. They started bending at sharper angles, sometimes almost touching the ground before springing back up. The woman described it as looking like they were being manipulated by invisible hands. Suddenly, there was a bright flash from the center of the circle, bright enough that she had to shield her eyes. When she looked back, the glow had disappeared, and the corn had stopped moving. The field looked completely normal, as if nothing had happened. Confused and somewhat alarmed, she checked her phone, thinking to take a photo or video if the phenomenon resumed. However, she found that her phone had powered off, despite having had nearly a full charge when she left work. When she tried to turn it back on, it showed the low battery symbol. The woman sat in her car for several more minutes, watching the now still cornfield and trying to process what she had witnessed. Eventually, she decided to continue her drive home, feeling shaken by the experience. Over the next few days, she returned to the site during daylight hours. She found no evidence of any disturbance in the field. The corn looked healthy and undamaged, with no signs of the dramatic movement she had observed. She asked a few neighboring farmers if they had noticed anything unusual, but none had. She's been struggling to make sense of what she saw that night. As someone who works in media, she's hesitant to share her story widely, fearing skepticism or ridicule. However, she's certain that what she witnessed was real and far outside the realm of normal experience. The woman admits she has no explanation for what occurred. She's hoping that by sharing her account, she might find others who have had similar experiences, or perhaps gain some insight into the strange events of that early May morning in the Kansas cornfields. It's kind of funny what can get someone excited, that feeling of stepping into something new and unknown. For me, it's all about digging into the past, that thrill of poking around in old, forgotten places, like the huge, empty Packard plant in Detroit, Michigan. You might think I'm a bit odd. A lot of people do. I've always stood out a bit from the crowd. So there I was, a few days after Halloween in Detroit for work, and I just couldn't ignore the pull of that old, run-down factory. The Packard plant, once a big deal in the car world, was now just an empty shell sitting vacant. It was as if it was challenging me, showing off the whole life cycle of big industries. They start, they grow, and eventually they die and crumble. I had my investigative gear with me, a flashlight, my camera, and one of those masks to keep out the bad air. You never know what's still hanging around in these old places. So with a mix of nosiness and stupid courage, I walked up to the giant old building as the day was ending. Pigeons were flitting around, owning the place that used to be full of machine noise and busy with people. But now, it was quiet inside, except for the sound of rainwater dripping through holes in the roof. Now and then, a breeze would blow through the smashed windows, carrying with it the echoes of what this place used to be. The upper floors were dim, barely holding on to the evening light, while the lower levels were just swallowed up in darkness, like the daylight was too scared to go down there. The size of the place, with the shadows and light playing tricks, it turned the normal into something strange and eerie. Steel beams reached up like bare bones, and the ground was covered in broken glass that crunched under my boots. My footsteps echoed around the empty factory, making it feel like it was full of ghosts. The air was thick with the smell of damp, old oil, and rust. It was like you could taste the years with every breath. And just when you think it's all about the emptiness, that's when the place surprises you. The walls were covered in graffiti, like wild tattoos on the building's wrecked skin, showing that people always want to leave their mark. The old machines were just lying there, rusted and silent, like they were asleep in a tomb made of concrete and peeling paint. I kept moving as the evening light gave way to night. There's something about pushing deeper into the dark, where the light can't reach, and time seems to stretch out. That really gets to you. It feels heavy. Every little sense is turned up to 11. It's like the uncertainty of it all is alive, buzzing through you. That's what's so cool about exploring old ruins. It's the scare, the rush, the feeling of touching the untouched, and the prize, feeling like you're the first person to set foot in there. As I went deeper, the light from my flashlight started playing tricks, bouncing off the huge, rusting machines. Then I heard something, a weird, soft tapping sound coming from way over in the far corner. It was like a beat, kind of like when a woodpecker goes to town on a tree or a bat in a cave. Super weird. My heart was thumping hard. I shook it off and kept going, my light struggling against the thick dark. The noise got louder, weirder, and then it just cut off, leaving a silence so thick you felt you could touch it. Like when quiet is so intense it's almost a thing. That's when all those ghost stories I never paid mind to started creeping into my head, making me wonder if coming here was such a hot idea after all. But before I could make up my mind, the darkness changed, like it moved or something. And I had this chill, like someone or something was watching me. It wasn't just a hunch either. I could see bits of movement, shadows that didn't belong, all just out of clear sight. My heart was racing. I yelled out, but my voice just bounced around that huge space and didn't find anybody. Then it showed up. It was like the air changed when it arrived, getting heavier, sucking in the light. My flashlight's beam caught something creepy crawling on the ground way off in the shadows, fast and quiet, like a shadow that's come to life. It had skin like a pale, sickly fish, all wrong in this dusty, rusty place. When I saw its face, if you could call it that, it was just gaping dark holes for eyes and a mouth, no nose, no ears, just Nothing. The clicking came again, louder, like it was coming for me. I was stuck in place, scared stiff. This thing was terrifying, not just how it looked, but the fear it carried with it. I didn't even decide to run. My legs just went for it. I ran like mad, past the old broken machines and the ghosts of the factory's busy days. The clicking got quieter behind me as I pushed through the dark, desperate for the light outside. When I finally got out, the night air hit me like a wave, and I was gasping for breath like I'd been underwater. My heart wouldn't slow down, and I could still feel those empty eyes on me, like I'd just escaped from something hunting me. Driving back to the hotel, the whole thing kept playing over and over in my head. I couldn't shake the fear or the image of that thing. That plant with its big, empty halls was home to something now, something that might never have been human. The Packard plant's got a new story to tell now, one with shadows hiding something dark and strange. The place has literally got this creature right out of a nightmare, living where all the work used to happen. I've heard all sorts of spooky stories since then, about spirits hanging around old, forgotten spots, becoming part of the place like the bricks and the beams, but nothing stuck with me like the horror and the pull of that thing in the Packard plant. That's the deal with exploring old ruins. They're never really empty. There's a terrible beauty in them. They're telling stories all the time, stories about what was and what's still there, stories that feel too real, too close, stories that should probably stay secret. The mist clung to the ancient trees as dawn broke over the Cascade Mountains. Dew covered the ferns and moss-covered logs, creating an ethereal atmosphere in the old-growth forest. This particular section of North Cascades National Park was rarely visited, its rugged terrain and lack of maintained trails deterring all but the most adventurous and somewhat crazy hikers. Amelia Thorne stood at the trailhead, double-checking her backpack's contents. At 28, she was an experienced backcountry hiker and amateur botanist, but this expedition was unique. Her pack was heavier than usual, loaded with extra supplies for what she anticipated would be a multi-day trek into uncharted territory. The North Cascades, often called the American Alps, are home to over 300 glaciers, more than any other U.S. park outside Alaska. These mountains receive abundant rainfall, resulting in lush forests and diverse ecosystems. Amelia's eyes scanned the towering western hemlocks and Douglas firs, some of which were over 1,000 years old. Their massive trunks disappeared into the mist above, creating an almost claustrophobic feeling despite the vastness of the wilderness. Amelia's journey began months earlier when she stumbled upon an intriguing reference in an obscure botanical journal from the 1950s. The article mentioned a unique orchid species, supposedly found in a remote valley deep within the North Cascades. What caught Amelia's attention was the orchid's described bioluminescent properties, a trait unheard of in any known North American plant species. The journal's author, Dr. Eleanor Blackwood, had apparently never returned from her expedition to study the orchid. Her disappearance had been closed, citing the dangers of solo hiking in treacherous terrain, but Amelia always wondered if there was more to the truth. As she set off on the faint game trail, Amelia's mind wandered to the facts she'd gathered about bioluminescent organisms. While common in marine environments, terrestrial bioluminescence was far rarer. Fireflies were the most well-known example, using a chemical reaction to produce their characteristic glow. Some fungi, like the ghost fungus found in Australia, could also emit a faint light. But a bioluminescent orchid? It seemed almost impossible. The first few hours of hiking were strenuous but straightforward. Amelia's boots crunched on pine needles and navigated around fallen logs. She paused occasionally to consult her topographic map and GPS, ensuring she stayed on course. The mist began to lift as the morning wore on, revealing glimpses of snow-capped peaks in the distance. By midday, Amelia had climbed nearly 2,000 feet in elevation. The forest composition changed subtly, with more western red cedars and mountain hemlocks appearing. She stopped for lunch on a rocky outcrop, savoring the panoramic view of the valley below. A golden eagle soared on thermals, its wingspan impressive even from a distance. As Amelia continued her ascent in the afternoon, the trail became increasingly difficult to follow. She found herself bushwhacking through dense thickets of salmonberry and thimbleberry, their thorns catching on her clothing. The humid air was thick with the scent of decaying vegetation and the earthy aroma of fungi. It was during one of her frequent stops to check her bearings that Amelia noticed something odd. The forest had grown unnaturally quiet. The constant background chorus of birdsong and insect buzzing had ceased, leaving an eerie silence broken only by the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. Unease prickled at the back of Amelia's neck. In her years of outdoor experience, she'd learned to trust her instincts. Something felt off. She scanned the surrounding forest, searching for any sign of large predators like black bears or mountain lions, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. As the afternoon waned, Amelia realized she needed to find a suitable campsite soon. The terrain had become increasingly rugged, with steep drop-offs and unstable scree slopes. She carefully picked her way along a narrow ledge, acutely aware of the long fall that awaited one misstep. Just as the fading light was making navigation treacherous, Amelia spotted a small, relatively flat area nestled between two massive boulders. It wasn't ideal, but it would have to do. She quickly set up her ultralight tent and prepared a simple meal of dehydrated pasta. As darkness fell, the silence of the forest became even more pronounced. No owls hooted, no small mammals rustled in the underbrush. Amelia found it deeply unsettling. She tried to distract herself by reviewing Dr. Blackwood's journal entries, searching for clues about the orchid's exact location. It was well past midnight when a faint sound caught Amelia's attention. At first, she thought it was her imagination, but as she strained her ears, she could make out a low, pulsing hum. It seemed to be coming from deeper in the valley, its rhythm almost hypnotic. Curiosity overrode caution, and Amelia emerged from her tent. The moonless night was pitch black now, but as her eyes adjusted, she noticed something extraordinary. Tiny points of bluish-green light dotted the forest floor, pulsing in sync with the mysterious hum. Heart racing, Amelia fumbled for her camera. Could these be the bioluminescent orchids Dr. Blackwood had described? But as she zoomed in on the nearest cluster of lights, her excitement turned to confusion. The glowing points weren't coming from plants at all. They appeared to be some kind of small, bioluminescent insect, unlike any species Amelia had ever encountered. As she watched, transfixed, the glowing insects began to move. They moved into a swirling pattern, forming shapes that seemed almost deliberate. A chill ran down Amelia's spine as she realized the swarm was creating recognizable symbols. Circles, triangles, and more complex geometric shapes flickered in and out of existence. The humming grew louder, and Amelia felt a strange pressure building in her head. The swarm's movements became more frenzied, the light pulsing faster. She stumbled backward, suddenly overcome with dizziness. In her disoriented state, Amelia's foot caught on a root. She fell hard, her camera clattering away into the darkness. As she struggled to her feet, a new sound cut through the humming, a low, rumbling growl that was definitely not recognizable. Panic surged through Amelia's body. She scrambled back into her tent, heart pounding. The growl came again, closer this time, accompanied by the snapping of branches. Whatever was out there, it was big. Amelia's hands shook as she grabbed her emergency satellite communicator. She needed help, needed to get out of here. But as she pressed the SOS button, The device remained stubbornly dark. Dead battery? Interference? She didn't know, but cold dread settled in her stomach as she realized she was totally alone. The growling creature was very close now. Amelia could hear its heavy breathing, smell a musky odor that reminded her of wet dog mixed with something alien. She held her breath, praying her tense, thin fabric would somehow shield her from whatever was prowling outside. Suddenly, a blinding flash of blue-green light flooded the campsite. The humming reached a deafening crescendo, and Amelia felt as if her skull might split open from the pressure. She squeezed her eyes shut, covering her ears. And then, as abruptly as it began, everything stopped. The light vanished, the humming ceased, and the forest fell into an oppressive silence once more. When she finally gathered the courage to unzip her tent, pale pre-dawn light was filtering through the trees. The campsite looked undisturbed, with no sign of the creature or the bioluminescent swarm. As Amelia packed up her gear with trembling hands, her mind raced. What had she witnessed? Was it altitude sickness or some toxic plant nearby? Or had she stumbled upon something beyond her comprehension? Amelia's scientific curiosity ultimately overrode her fear. She decided to press on, hoping to uncover the truth about Dr. Blackwood's disappearance and the strange phenomena she had just witnessed. With renewed determination, she continued her descent into the valley, following the faint traces of a long, overgrown trail. As she hiked, Amelia noticed subtle changes in the surrounding vegetation. Unfamiliar plant species began to appear, flowers with oddly iridescent petals, ferns with fractal-like patterns, and fungi that seemed to pulse with an inner light. She meticulously documented everything, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. By late afternoon, Amelia reached the valley floor. A thick mist had settled in, limiting visibility to just a few meters. She carefully made her way through the landscape, using her compass to maintain her bearings. Suddenly, the mist parted, revealing a sight that took Amelia's breath away. Before her stood an enormous, ancient tree. Its trunk was easily 10 meters in diameter, with bark that shimmered with a faint bluish glow. Bioluminescent vines wound their way up the massive trunk, pulsing softly in the gathering twilight. She could barely believe what she was seeing. As Amelia approached the tree in awe, she noticed something half buried at its base. Her heart raced as she uncovered a weathered backpack, its material degraded by years of exposure. Inside, she found a water-damaged journal, unmistakably belonging to Dr. Eleanor Blackwood. With trembling hands, Amelia opened the journal to its final legible entry. "I found it, the source of the bioluminescence. It's not just the orchids, it's everything here. This valley, this tree, it's all connected. The fungi, the insects, even the air itself seems charged with some kind of bioelectric energy. I've never seen anything like it in all my years of research. But there's something else here, something watching. I can feel it. The light patterns, they're not random. It's communication. I'm close to understanding, but I need more time. If anyone finds this, know that I chose to stay. This discovery is too important. I have to see it through, no matter the risk." The journal ended there. Amelia looked up at the massive tree, her mind reeling with the implications of Dr. Blackwood's words. But as she stood there, clutching Dr. Blackwood's journal, a cold realization washed over her. The renowned botanist had vanished here decades ago, likely succumbing to the same fascination that now tugged at Amelia's mind. She thought of her own family, her research, and the life she had back in the world beyond this eerie valley. With a heavy heart, Amelia made the difficult decision to leave. She carefully repacked Dr. Blackwood's journal, determined to share this discovery with the scientific community and perhaps organize a proper expedition in the future. As she began her ascent out of the valley, Amelia could have sworn she heard a faint whisper on the wind, almost like a voice urging her to stay. The bioluminescent lights seemed to flare brighter, as if in protest of her departure. Amelia quickened her pace, her heart pounding. She hiked through the night, guided by her headlamp and an urgent need to put distance between herself and the mysterious valley. As dawn broke, she finally reached familiar terrain. Looking back, Amelia could no longer see any signs of the strange bioluminescence or the massive tree. The valley was shrouded in mist, its secrets hidden again. With mixed emotions of relief, regret, and determination, Amelia continued her journey back to civilization. She carried with her Dr. Blackwood's journal and a story that she knew would challenge the scientific community's understanding of bioluminescence and forest ecosystems, if only she could get them to listen. As she hiked, Amelia vowed to return someday, better prepared and with a team of researchers. But for now, she was grateful to be leaving the enigmatic valley behind, its mysteries and the fate of Dr. Blackwood left unresolved in the depths of the North Cascades.